Good morning. We're going to talk a little bit today about Shakespeare's Sonnet 130, My Mistress's Eyes Are Nothing Like the Sun. But before we do, let's view this.
We don't read and write poetry because it's cute. We read and write poetry because we are members of the human race, and the human race is filled with passion. Medicine, law, business, engineering, these are noble pursuits and necessary to sustain life. But poetry, beauty, romance, love, these are what we stay alive for. To quote from Whitman, "O me, O life of the questions of these recurring, of the endless trains of the faithless, of cities filled with the foolish, what good amid these, O me, O life?" Answer, that you are here, that life exists and identity, that the powerful play goes on and you may contribute a verse. That the powerful play goes on and you may contribute a verse. What will yours be?
Oh, poor Todd. So Robin Williams, that is John Keating, reflects sort of a ethos about poetry that I'm going to start with today, and that is back in the 14th century in Renaissance Italy. If I can get there. There's a guy named Francesco Petrarch who wrote sonnets. They were different. They were different style and sort of different structure from Shakespeare, but he was influential in that he sort of created the ethos of a sort of a ideal woman, ideal beauty, and that women were sort of creatures of beauty that you didn't really have to get into substance in order to appreciate the beauty of women. This led to the Cavalier poets, who very much reflected what Robin Williams and John Keating was saying in that last clip about how you should seize the day. There's only so much time in the world, and you should make the most of every moment. And this also, of course, applied to romance. So here's something that's kind of funny. Now, if you click that, you're going to come up with this handout, which is got the poem, but it's also got the how you would pronounce it in iambic pentameter. And it also gives you a sense of the rhyme scheme. And there's also some other resources here that we'll get into when we actually are trying to create our own sonnets or our own partial sonnets. Here's the interesting point of fact. In Shakespeare's day, right here, they had to close the theaters in London because of the pandemic, and they had to do social distancing. So we have something in common with William Shakespeare. Isn't that cool? Here is the version of it. You guys will obviously get this link, but here's the version of it that is annotated, and I'm not sure how much you're going to make it. So let's just jump right into the poem. I'm going to read it to you to start with. And the reason I'm not doing full screen here right now is because my head will be in the way. I guess I could fix that, but you can read it. Sonnet 130 by William Shakespeare. My mistress's eyes are nothing like the sun. Coral is far more red than her lips red. If snowy white, why then her breasts are dun. If hairs be wires, black wires grow on her head. I have seen roses damasked, red and white, but no such roses see I in her cheeks. And in some perfumes is there more delight than in the breath that from my mistress reeks. I love to hear her speak, yet well I know that music hath a far more pleasing sound. I grant I never saw a goddess go. My mistress, when she walks, treads on the ground. And yet, by heaven, I think my love as rare as any she belied with false compare. All right, now we can break it down. This is, and you're going to have a copy of this that you're going to make a copy of this that's also on that other handout. But this is basically the structure of a Shakespearean sonnet. It's 14 lines. It's iambic pentameter. We already know what those are. The rhyme scheme is specifically in 3 quatrains: A, B, C, D, E, F, and then a conclusion of G, G. So it's kind of like a puzzle, and it's really probably the most formulaic form of poetry in English, I would think. But here we go. First quatrain, Here we go. My mistress's eyes are nothing like the sun. Coral is far more red than her lips red. If snow be white, why then her breasts are done. If hairs be wires, black wires grow under her head. So let's look at some of the commentations here. Now, as we said before, uh, Shakespeare was known to have some romantic tendencies. He left his wife his second best bed when he died, which might tell you something. My mistress, so mistress basically has a connotation that he's probably cheating on his wife, or who knows. There's some conjecture that Shakespeare was bisexual. In any case, there are certain themes that ran through Shakespearean sonnets, and this is the antithesis of the ideal beauty. So he's actually kind of taking a shot at the ideal sort of, oh, let's all drop everything and follow around the beautiful blonde woman. So in his mistress's eyes are nothing like the sun. And to start with, eyes, of course, are a trope that you would often use, and you'll notice that this quatrain it appeals to anatomy, and in a way, it's almost as if it's a negative reverse synecdoche. You know, a synecdoche is when you say all hands on deck. I want all eyes on me. Lend me your ears. So in this case, they're basically sort of dehumanizing her anatomy. So Coral's more red than her lips are red. Okay, so the ideal assumption is that the ideal beauty is red-lipped, and of course, the antithesis is eyes and sun. Okay, so in like many of these lines in this particular sonnet, the action goes up and then it goes down. So my mistress's eyes are nothing like the sun. Okay, Coral is far more red, and now it flips it over. So it's mistress's eyes, then the sun, which is brilliant, sparkling, huge, and then back to something natural. And then so the second line is sort of a flip of the first line that's talking about the mistress's eyes are nothing like the sun, which is the natural thing, and then the natural thing, Coral is far more red than her lips red. So he's playing around with up and down. And look at the parallel structure of these next two lines. If snow be white, go up, why then her breasts are done. Okay, so if hair be wires, black wires grow on her head. So it's like, if this is, it's cause and effect. If this is this, and obviously snow being white is kind of a cliche in itself. Breast being done means dark, okay? And the other thing that puzzles me a little bit about this is hair be wires. What would wires be in that context of Shakespeare? They didn't have electricity. So what kind of wires did they have? And why would hairs be wires? I guess what I'm picturing it is curly blonde hair, but still that doesn't, to me, my connotation in the 21st century is those are not wires. But anyway, they're black wires. She's got dark breasts. So basically already she's sort of the antithesis of the ideal beauty. Let's see. There's also, let's see. Oh, the parallel structure we talked about, the antithesis. Okay. Oh, the negative simile we talked about, nothing like the sun. And then, okay, second thought. I have seen Rose at Damask. Okay, you see that there's a little shift there. Now suddenly it becomes a personal narrative. Now here's another kind of interesting thing. Roses, of course, that's an interesting trope in the first place, but actually there's a little historic reference here because this is not long after the War of the Roses, in which the York family was represented by White Rose and the Lancasters by the Red Rose. And they were at war for 13 years, something like that. So some say that actually that choice of allusion was a reference. And these poets, by the way, were highly loyal to the royalty because the royalty they patronized it. Charles I was very much loved by the Cavalier poets. You may or may not know that just before this time, or there was the English Civil War in which Charles I was actually deposed. And there's a lot of political intrigue going on right now, and a lot of poets were sort of clamoring to be patronized by royalty, and it totally makes sense. Shakespeare actually was successful in his time, unlike many artists. Okay, so the point of view changes. I have seen Roses damasked red and white. Now, damask, by the way, has two meanings. When I looked it up, it showed actually a rose that was streaked red and white, which I found to be interesting. But also, if you look up, do an image search, you'll come up with like flowery material. So I tend to think that it's probably the former connotation, not the latter. But and then the idea that roses, of course, there's the red cheeks, the red lips, and there's a certain ideal beauty that Shakespeare's woman does not have. So there's also that typical no such roses see I in her cheeks when he's putting the verb before the subject. It sort of puts more emphasis on in her cheeks rather than I. Okay, I see in her cheeks would be see I in her cheeks is a little bit more. It sort of takes you off guard and puts more emphasis on the cheeks. And in some perfumes, is there more delight? So you can see he's starting to qualify the argument a little bit. So not all perfumes, but he's sort of warming up. He starts off actually, it's kind of critiquing this woman, but he's sort of warming up as the poem goes on. Then another interesting thing here: in some perfumes, is there more delight than in the breath that from my mistress reeks? Now, we all think that reeks means stinks, okay, and it does. But also in this context, I looked up, it said that reeks also means like to emanate or to rise. So it could be both, and it could be either. But I think the tendency is certainly negative that it reeks. A quick funny story in this time period, men thought it was a romantic thing to do to take an apple and give it to a woman who would carry it in her armpit all day. At the end of the day, when it had taken on a little bit of her body odor, the guy would take it back and eat it. So, there's a lot of sensory detail here. So we've seen roses, and now we're smelling perfume and smelling breath that reeks. So there's a real appeal to the sensory detail. And watch what happens now. Okay. Maybe I'll present, see if that works. Okay, here we go. Okay, I love to hear speak. Okay, now he's hearing. Now we've got the sensory, the sound sense, the hearing sense, and he's also warming up to it because I love to hear speak. Yet, okay, antithesis. Yet, well, I know that music hath a far more pleasing sound. It doesn't really say what kind of music, but okay. And now here's a beautiful alliteration. I grant I never saw a goddess go. Of course he hasn't. But my mistress, when she walks, treads on the ground. So he's saying, like, she doesn't walk on air. She walks on the ground. She's a normal woman. And then this is all, again, personal narrative. I grant I never saw a goddess go. So now we have seeing, we have hearing, we have smelling. So he's really appealing to sensory details. So here's the conclusion. And yet, by heaven, now I never thought of Shakespeare as being particularly religious, but he does actually refer to heaven and God occasionally. And yet, okay, here it is again. There's all these antitheses, and yet. I think my love as rare as any, beautiful euphonic word, rare, as any she belied with false compare. Now, I was a little confused with that pronoun in the last line, but from what I've read and what I've gathered, it's talking about Shakespeare is basically concluding by saying that poets that just deal with physical beauty are missing out. Okay, that the inner beauty is far more important than what you see in the surface. Okay. Okay, here's what we're going to do with this. You have okay. We're going to conclude with that. Great. So this is another line that if you open it, it will look like this. Yep. So here it is. So there's three activities, levels of activity that I'd like you to try. First of all, click that link and copy it. Put it in your homework folder on OneNote, and you'll end up with this. And the requirement is that you write at least one quatrain, okay? That you fill up at least one of these. Why is that doing that? Okay, anyway. So there it is. These are actually our syllables. And of course, it's not absolutely perfect. It doesn't have to be, you can see that my mistress's eyes are nothing like the sun is. My mistress's eyes. No, it's not quite that exaggerated. But it's a general sort of structure, but don't make it ridiculous. So you can either use this and there's your rhyme scheme, there's your templates, or you can use this. It's essentially the same thing. But this will help you, I think, structured. So here's what I want you to do is at least one, okay, that's required. If the optional assignments are There's a sonnet sampler that's also linked to this original handout. Read 3 sonnets and enjoy them. Okay, there's a whole bunch of them here, and see if you can see any correlative structures or any connections among those sonnets, because that's where we're heading, right? We're heading to compare and contrast. Oh no, actually that's the other class. Sorry, never mind. So that's okay. So that's optional, and then your extension, of course, would be to write an entire sonnet, fill out populate that entire table. And actually, I wouldn't do it on the table probably because it'll mess up words. You know, that's just basically what it looks like. I would think that this would work out much better for you. But there it is. There's your structure, the Shakespearean sonnet, and finish with just something really fun. I want to show you that sonnets are not always they're still alive. Okay, they're still useful. This is Lin-Manuel Miranda. He used to freestyle whenever he won an award, and he said, "I'm getting too old for that." So we actually wrote his wife a sonnet. I want to warn you ahead of time that not exactly the same structure as a Shakespearean sonnet, and I can't seem to get to it. Hang on. There it is. Okay. So this is when he got the Tony Award, and this is great.
My wife's the reason anything gets done. She nudges towards promise by degrees. She is a perfect symphony of one. Our son is her most beautiful reprise. We chase the melodies that seem to find us until they're finished songs and start to play. When senseless acts of tragedy remind us that nothing here is promised. Not one day. The show is proof that history remembers. We live through times when hate and fear seem stronger. We rise and fall and light from dying embers, remembrances that hope and love last longer. And love is 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 love, cannot be killed or swept aside. I sing Vanessa's symphony. Eliza tells her story. Now fill the world with music, love. Thank you so much for
So if you're interested, you also have the text. I don't know how bad this. You also have the text on the same handout. There it is. The text just keeps jumping around. I'm not sure why. Anyway, Sonnet 130, My Mistress's Eyes Are Nothing Like the Sun. It's antithesis. It's basically critiquing what was commonly accepted to be a standard of beauty that was very surface. And so Shakespeare, in a very ironic and sort of coy way, sort of makes fun of these guys. And so the overall tone in this is really, at the end, it's kind of fun. And also you come out saying, Shakespeare actually had an aesthete that, he wasn't easily won over by just surface beauty. He sought inner beauty. And that's about it. So enjoy yourself. Have a good time writing your sonnets. And see you soon, I hope.